Okay. As I said, we had two very good panels. The panels were very active. We're always open to new names for our panelists. So if anybody's interested in serving on a panel, please by all means contact me at Metro. That's McBride at WMATA.com. You'll find that the panels are a lot of fun. The first question that I wanted to put forth to the panel is if you could just sort of describe your overall impressions of participating on the panel and what really surprised you about the process.
What surprised me, I think that the people who were brought around the table were really people with different points of view. Well, they represented, different areas, or I think around each metro station, they really brought different points of view, experiences that were very valuable to the conversation. I think that we were wonderfully bombarded by so many images of so many wonderful artists. Also, the challenge to narrow down that selection was tremendous, and I think sometimes there were very obvious choices, but at other times there were interesting conversations about, when you have to bring down the selection to two or three artists per station.
For me, it was a surprise how well we did get along, although I disagreed strongly about one, and I'm not going to tell you which one. I wanted to take this opportunity to thank Kathy Hudgens and those who worked for getting the money put back in the program. Yay, you guys! It was wonderful to actually meet the artists in person. I'm a giant man of a stonemason for the CIT Center. It was a great experience altogether.
Yeah, it was a real delight. It was rather daunting, especially when we all arrived the first morning, and it was a true mix of panelists. We had engineers from the project, so very technical types, very artistic types. But when Michael began to describe our limitations in the fact that the art had to be fully, relatively structurally integrated into each station, man, that made things far more complex. But as you both said, the variety of backgrounds presented and the different folks who, pardon me, Michael, the different constituencies represented. I was fortunate to sit on the panel on behalf of Loudoun County and Chairman of the Board of Supervisors, Scott York. And so trying to think about all things Loudoun, someone asked about how it related to the community. Well, we used a lot of granite in the pieces in Loudoun because of their stone quarries, and the, if I'm not jumping, the two women from Vancouver who did the dead and dying crows that transformed to the herons, they had done significant history and research into Loudoun, and they had been to the museum and been to the farm museum and actually took the grove from the Loudoun symbol, what do you call it?
The seal.
The seal, exactly. And I'll stop, but it was terrific, and thanks to Michael for leading a great, long process.
It's kind of funny though, when you start a panel, as Maggie said, it's a very long process. Basically, you start at 9, you're lucky if you're out of there by 6. Everybody's so nice when they start out. And let me tell you, don't end up that way. You see folks just pulling it out as you go along. So you have to feed them to keep them okay. But we did all right in the end. As panelists, you had to weigh many considerations because of who you represented. Can you tell the group here what some of those considerations were from your unique perspective, from your unique place of representation, if you will?
Yes, though I would like to start by saying that I felt that everyone on the committee really took to heart the selection for each station. While yes, I represented Reston. I still took to heart that, the work in Herndon or, further along the way in Loudon would have the best artists possible for the location. So to me that was important also, but of course trying to interpret what Reston needs and which artist would be the best to represent that vision of, and there were interesting discussions whether we should look at, I think also many people have different interpretations of what Reston means to them, or are we looking to the future, the present, the past, so, I gave thought to all these elements in the selection. Fortunately, we have to review more artists because, as it turns out, we don't have an artist currently for Reston. But essentially, these were my thoughts to try to represent the best way possible this community, and find artists who have the right sensibility and way of representing it through their art form.
Did you have any particular disappointment in not being able to find include a Virginia-based artist in our?
Yes, but sitting here today, I'm thinking this might be a wonderful opportunity. We're speaking more about the project, and maybe there's a way, maybe, depending on how the process, how it will take place, there might be opportunities to open that opportunity, getting the word out even more. Yes, I think so. And I think that it was clear in our discussions, throughout the meetings that came up very soon in our conversation. Yeah.
Well, the hardest thing for me was not to find a Virginia artist, but we were forbidden from looking at any stained glass because there was so much stained glass before, and so many of the wonderful proposals we saw, to die for. We would have really all stained glass the whole way out. I think that I represent Herndon because my heart is there as well. I didn't want any of the stations to get short shrift or to dominate. And you might think, well, Dulles is pretty fabulous, but I think each one of them has got something really special about it. The light that might shine up into the airplane pilot's eyes was a hindrance because we had some snazzy things going on that light bridge in Herndon, but couldn't do that. So I'm very happy with what we did, and yes, I hope we can find a Virginia artist.
And we did evaluate several, but again, as you sit through the process, vetting you start with our pool for phase 2, it was, let's say 400. So you begin with this and you're looking at many of each artist's works of art, and you like or don't like, you try and determine, you're looking at big sculptures, well, they won't work because it has to be integrated. You're looking at columns that, but how many columns can you decorate? We had big, long stations sitting in the middle of our corridor. Wouldn't it be nice to do something on the outside walls of those stations so that it could be enjoyed by the passersby in the cars, buses, vehicles? So all of these things begin trickling. You don't, as Pat said, you can't have all stained glass. And then we would decide on something. We looked at, as getting back to several Virginia artists, and as we evaluated it, really looked and said, you know what? It's not durable. Secondly, if we're looking at them for the exterior of the station, could they really go to the concrete plant and install it on site so that when they come in to put up the 40-foot panels on the side, would it hold? So really, it's a whole lot more than just walking through a museum and saying, boy, that's snazzy.
That's very true. Yes. Feel free to ask questions. Please do. Yes, sir.
I heard in the panel, are you still looking for a Virginia artist or just?
For Reston, not necessarily, it doesn't have to be.
Because one thing that I admire is Mr. Simon's bronze. I love bronze sculptures, and I don't see any of those included amongst those. And there's a wonderful bronze artist that's from the eastern shore of Virginia that may be appropriate, and I can put them in contact.
They may not have submitted.
They may not have submitted.
Yeah, what we're probably going to do, very quickly in fact, is just simply go through what we received. We received over 360 portfolios, so we will most likely go through those. Yes, ma'am?
When they submit proposals, is it for a station or just for the whole concept?
It's for the, well, this was a very interesting call to artists because it involved, at least on phase 2, it involved 6 stations. That in itself made the panel's task really daunting. They had to review over 3,000 slides. That's a lot.
But when the artists submitted the proposals, was it a proposal say, I want to do it for Dulles, or I want to do it for, or was it just?
It's a very good question. They submit their portfolios for a sort of generic consideration, if you will. The panel then decides what artists might be suitable for a particular station. And as Maggie said, for example, in one station, we wanted stone. So we had to find, within that 300 and something, we had to find an artist who works in stone.
I would like to add that this was really, well, daunting. Maggie mentioned that not only did we have to select the artists, but then we're shown areas where the work could be commissioned, but then we had to say, all right, we recommend that these artists consider proposing a work for this area or this area. So even to visualize what the station would look like, the location from models, needs a lot of imagination and I think and discussions during those meetings.
And what happened? Go ahead, Maggie.
Just a little bit about the process. We met in pairs of days several different times. So we evaluated the 360, narrowed them down to a workable amount, narrowed them down further, and then Michael worked closely to, how did the process go, Michael? Then did we have?
Do you want to be real about it?
No. Yes.
Well, we started with these, 3,000 images, and everybody's, oh, I love this, and before you know it, everything was still there. Nobody sort of mixed anything. So then we had to sort of say, sometimes you have to murder your darlings, you gotta let them go. And so we went through with more intent and focus. And that's generally how panels go.
But then the callbacks.
Yes, and that's generally how panels go, and that people will just love everything. And you can love everything we could be here for 6 months, and you'll still be loving everything, we still don't have anything. So again, we try to focus down, narrow it down to a point. We try to hit a number, like 60 by lunchtime. And we were able to do that, I think. In terms of what happens after that is, as people look at the artwork, you have to keep in mind which station you're thinking about a particular artist for. So that when you get up on the board, you say, I want Joe to do station A, Joe to do station B. Joe's portfolio is suitable for either of those stations. Then the artists, we notify the artists, they develop a site-specific proposal. They come in and present their proposal. Now I must say,
Several for each station.
yes, 3 for each station. I must say that that's where a lot of artists don't quite get it. Like if you're standing before a panel and the panel says, oh, I love that, but can you change this so that the artist says no? Guess what's going to happen? It was the artists that were most flexible, I think, that we found most suitable for the work. Because these artists will have to work as a member of the design-build team. And it's wonderful to have this very focused artistic intent, but you gotta be flexible. So we were not only looking at the artwork itself, the artwork proposal, but how the artist might work with a member of the design-build team. Do you guys want to make any comments about the various artists that we saw without names, please?
Some of them were more flexible than others, but the challenge when they hit the wall was there were a lot of engineers in our group, and they had to have, how could we change the light bulbs in this thing? Had to be fully integrated. And some of the people came back with totally off the wall. I mean, what were they thinking? It was just like, here's this beautiful opportunity, and no, I don't think so. But how could you clean the tiles on the outside of a station? How could you make sure it's LED so it will last a long time? And no trip hazards. I learned trip hazard very well during this session.
Trip and snag.
I would like to say that I think the artists that really, there were some amazing artists when you see their work, in photos and but then when you interact with them and ask them questions as to their flexibility, while you still want them to have their vision and demonstrate their ability in the artwork, you want them to be able to have a conversation, as Michael said, and show some flexibility. I think that what impressed me with many artists, or for some stations, is very interesting, without naming names, that some group of artists came with the similar vision. Whereas I think we were surprised, like Maggie mentioned, this team, Metz and where they had done tremendous research, but there was an understanding and trying to integrate that into the work and hopefully have a dialogue with the community or the people who will use that station. So I think that when we met artists who had that sensibility, that awareness, that interest, whether it's in the community, in the nature, the technology, all issues that were addressed, or the history, I think we felt that immediately and felt they were the right people for the project.
And I do want to say that we took a great deal of time with the Reston Town Center station and decided that we really wanted to have something on the exterior walls, visible from both sides of the toll road. And we went very far down a path, and it was determined that it simply wasn't going to work for a number of reasons, including artist flexibility. But regardless, the other quick point I wanted to make was that $250,000 sounds like a very significant commission for a work, but we are looking for really large statement pieces, and it isn't that much. In addition to evaluating the artwork, we had to evaluate their budgets, and it was fascinating how many came in at $249,999. Anyway, really, the system is getting a very good deal with most of these installations because they're significant, and this is truly a drop in the bucket.
If you don't mind, Michael, me saying that, but also you have to think that this budget, the project will be realized in 4 or 5 years, so I don't know what the dollar will be worth, or the material, or depending on the type of materials that the artists are using. You have to take that into consideration, I think, also, and appreciate the fact that artists really want to see their work realized and are willing to, at some point, take cuts because they really believe in the project and think this is such an exceptional opportunity also. I don't know of any other metro project in the country of this scale or of this type. I don't know if you have anything to add to this, Michael.
No, we are the largest, and just in terms of cost versus benefit, know that the artwork that we installed has to have a life cycle of at least 50 years. So do the math. We're getting a lot for a penny. Someone, yes?
Yeah, I was just wondering, maybe I missed this, but you seem to have had such a huge challenge for all of the stations, for the three of you and Michael. Were there anybody, who else was involved in the selection process?
We had a total of 12 members. It was quite extensive. 12 is highly unusual, I must say, but then again, so is this project. You usually cap at about 7, but we wanted to make certain that all stakeholders had a voice. And as Maggie said, and Ann said, there were lots of technical people at the table. They give you a lot of agita, but nonetheless, you need to have them. It's better to catch stuff in the wash than in the rinse, so to speak. Okay.
So since we were talking about the budget, I thought it was very interesting, and I'm not sure everyone realizes when you see a budget of 250, the artist is typically getting about 20% of that. So much is really wrapped up in the material costs, the engineering, all the contractual fees. These large projects take a lot of engineering and architectural work. So the artist isn't getting that 250. And you think that they spend a couple of years working on the piece. So it's not as big a budget as it sounds.
Yes, and to your point, we do not allow the budgets to contain a line item that goes beyond 20% for an artist's fee. So again, it assures that the money will go to the art. Yes.
I was just curious as to how many of these pieces are going to be visible from the road, particularly say through Tyson's Corner, like from Route 7 or from 123, or again out here from the toll road.
Yes. Well, phase 1 and phase 2 are different. As I sort of peruse it in my own mind, I would say 90% of it is visible from the road, or pedestrian pathway in one way or the other. The only one that is not, I think, is the bridge. In Dulles, yeah, that's true. So that's true.
In Dulles.
Two out of 11.
Yeah. It seems like the Tyson's Corners one, the Tyson's ones, you would clear. I mean, at least a couple of them would be very visible, right there on Route 7, right?
You'd be amazed at how often the artwork sort of becomes a beacon, if you will, and an identifier for various communities. This project was before my time, so I'm not going to take, and actually I don't want to, any credit for it. But the penguins in Silver Spring, how many people are familiar with the penguins in Silver Spring? Anyway, this is a mural that just goes on forever and it has something to do with penguins. And the penguins are using the fair machines and walking around. The community loves it. It's a very whimsical piece, but they love it. And they use elements from that mural as a sort of identifier or brander, if you will, of their community. Go figure.
So you know where you're getting off. You get off at the penguin on the right, right?
Sure. we'll go with that.
One of the challenges was that trying to make it integral to the station. And Michael kept us really on task there because it had to be something you could sit on, something that could maybe light the area. It had to be something practical, something you could walk on and or give information. It wasn't just for the beauty of it, but benches would be nice to have, but maybe not to trip on when you come off the escalators. I have to say that a lot of the Adventure stations are pretty ugly, a horrible orange brick, but our efforts will make them a little more beautiful.
Well, thank you. There are no architects here, right? Yes, sir.
LaMotta has, a large impact on Reston. Our community has a very high use of Metro bus, and I'm certain that we'll use Metro rail in the future. But to what extent can the process that was utilized here for rail be implemented in our community and others at the Metro bus stations and little shelters? And how can our community get involved with that? How can IPAR move work going forward with you on those types of projects?
Andy, you want to? Sure, I'll start. We're always open to a good collaboration, and we've done it many times. An example is when we built the New York Avenue station, which is now called NOMA. We worked with an area school group to create murals that surrounded the construction site. And after the kids created the murals, they came out and they were thrilled by it. And then after the murals came down, we gave them to the schools, so they are installed in the schools. Anacostia Station, for example, we have an extraordinary mosaic piece that was done by a local artist And the DC Arts Commission gave us funding to hire apprentice. How do you say apprentice plural? Apprentice plural. Apprentice, I know. So the artists taught the students how to, create mosaic tiles, and it's one of the best pieces that we have. And I say all that to say that, we're open to any proposal to bring art to the Metro system, either it may be Metro Bus or Metro Rail. We've collaborated many times with the Poet Laureate of DC to install students' poetry on the buses, both interior and exterior. So again, we're always open to do something really creative that benefits the community.
Well, you're asking a question that is close to my heart in terms also of, I think it would be wonderful to find opportunities to collaborate with Mamata, and also with looking at bus shelters and how there are so many examples of very low budget but very effective ways of working with local artists to create designs and integrate them into existing types of bus shelters. It may not be, I know Washington has its own bus shelters, but in Virginia, I think this would be a cost-effective and a wonderful way to work with the community on these types of initiatives.
The other part of it, I think, and if we have another Metro person here, but if I'm not, who's actually working on designing some shelters? Tiffany Locklear is an architect with Metro. But many of the shelters that are used by Metro are actually owned by the jurisdictions,
Yes.
Is that the case?
Yes.
Okay.
If it's on our property, it's usually ours, but if it's on public streets or public ways, it's usually the jurisdictions. So, yeah.
But we would certainly, lend whatever resources are available to us to assist. Yes, sir?
I noticed many of the artwork uses light in very creative ways, and when one walks into a typical metro station, lighting is very dim. It's not very imaginative at all. We've got a lot of new developments in lighting technology now, especially the LED area. I noticed one of the pieces used that. Has any thought been given to improving the lighting in the underground metro stations and bringing in artistic flavor to it, using new lighting technology?
Sure. Lighting is not my area, but I'll do what I can here. The lighting system that's in the Metro system now was part of the original design concept. And one of the things that Harry Weiss wanted to do was to create an environment that calmed people. And obviously one of the ways you do that is with, very light, soft, low, soft light. Times have changed. The population's aging, and people need more light. And I think you'll find that Metro is working very hard with several pilot initiatives to explore what the best solution might be.
Dim light can be rather threatening too. It's not just a question of vision, but a feeling of security and safety and sort of openness. I think that's somewhat artistic, I guess. But there's various factors in there.
Yeah. Well, I think, obviously your concerns are very valid, and as I said, Metro is exploring ways to address that because the concerns are many. Very many people have the same concern that you have. Okay.
I would like to add something to Joe's point. I was preparing for this evening. I went back to the public art master plan for Reston, and I cannot take any credit for it, so that's why I can talk about it. We have to credit our board and the founding partner organization of IPAR for this publication. But there is a reference to the Metro coming, the Silver Line, and how, public art projects could be commissioned either, not only, and they refer to paths, for pedestrians going to the Metro, And I think there are so many opportunities there that have been already planned or identified in the public art master plan. But I would like to mention, as this is the only example I know currently, is the site at the really Reston East metro station and the efforts of Comstock to even create temporary artwork while the site is under construction and when the station will be open. So I think this is very exciting and showing the way to other projects, similar projects. And I don't know if Maggie wants to add something, but I think that's also very exciting.
Any other questions?
I have,
Yes, sir.
I get the impression that the public's been excluded from the selection of the art. I mean, you've got stakeholders who pick the final three pieces of art, and then somebody, some station manager or somebody picks the final art. Who picked the final piece?
What happens is the panel is comprised of people who represent the community. You know, there are arts professionals, there are community leaders, there are business leaders, so on and so forth. I mean, it's a good mix, and then there are also the technical people who have to be a part of the panel. The panel will make a recommendation to the general manager. That's the metro process. And the panel will generally say, of the three, this is the one we want. And knock on wood, that's what has happened. He has supported the recommendations of the panel. And again, the panel representing the respective communities.
So is there any consideration to have the public vote on the art?
That can be incredibly tricky. That's all I'm saying. The goal is always to organize a panel that represents the community. It allows for a certain amount of efficiency, if you will, and informed input. And that's by identifying a good panel.
I get the impression that the panel is not representing the community, it's representing stakeholders, and it's kind of elite panel of people that are elite, you know, they're special.
Beg your pardon, I'm not elite. I'm an artist and my heart is here. I really care
By
about
being an artist, you're specialized, you're an elite. I'm talking about the general public as being people who don't have an art background, so regular people. They don't seem to be represented. Your typical person.
Well, yeah, I mean, I have to go back to what is a known, well-traveled path, and that is pulling together a panel of people that are from the community. And a good panelist would consult the community. A good finalist would consult the community. That's generally how public art is selected. You'll find that most of the controversy around the selection of public art is generally when you do that sort of absolutely open involvement thing. But again, select involvement representing particular communities is the best way to go, from what we're aware of. But if you'd like to contact me after and with some examples of other ways to do it, we're certainly open to it. Yes, sir.
Could you talk about graffiti deterrence?
The biggest graffiti deterrent is not putting the artwork in the reach of anybody. So that's generally, what we do. There are exceptions, but when the artwork is accessible, it's usually an extremely durable material. Now, there are pieces in the system that were put in before I came along, and quite frankly, I wouldn't have done it that way. But since we keep things out of the reach of people, except for like when the granite pieces, it's okay. You can do whatever you want to granite. Hopefully people don't graffiti it, but it's very durable. Yes, sir.
Much of our information about the common people in the Roman Empire comes from graffiti in the towns that were covered by volcanic ash. So graffiti is not all bad, in my opinion.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, I was at, how many people here have been to Pompeii? Remember the graffiti on the curbside?
I don't know about that, wouldn't put on walls in your subway, but you saw on the walls.
I'm sorry?
I said you wouldn't put the art graffiti that's inside the houses on Pompeii, inside the subways here. At least I found them rather, never mind.
No, quite frankly, I mean, I'm not a they're elevating graffiti to art, which I think is, in my opinion, and this is a personal, not a metro opinion, graffiti is, to me, not art. Number one is you're defacing generally somebody else's property. That, to me, dispels it as an art. So that's just my personal opinion. But I was referring to the graffiti in Pompeii. There's some significant pieces of graffiti on the ground, but I have to go back and talk about that later. Anyone else? A question I wanted to ask the panel is, in terms of all the individual portfolios that you saw, what impressed you most about a particular portfolio, and what portfolio did you see that caused you to say, what were you thinking? Absolutely.
Well, the what were you thinking for me was when one of the artists or team of artists presented their design concept, and it had nothing to do with what they were asked to consider. And to me it was, yes, sometimes you can be wonderful and show your vision, but they didn't make any effort to try to present it in the way that would have been acceptable. While there might have been negotiations, conversations, compromises, there was no way to even start a discussion on a compromise, which I found unfortunate for this artist to lose this wonderful opportunity to have their work, at one of the stations. So it was more a lost opportunity for the artist than it was for us, I think. So this was my, what were you thinking?
And what can you think of one that you found was very impressive?
Well, I had one disappointment. One of the artists who was selected for Reston stepped down, and I thought that artist was wonderful. So that was my disappointment.
Okay, I told you I'm not going to tell you which one I hated. It was chosen, I'm not going to tell you. But I was disappointed that one that was for Reston Town Center, which swept me away with its lyrical beauty, wasn't chosen. What was everybody else thinking? They didn't see it through my eyes. So, yes, there was a really talented guy, and it kind of didn't go that way, and so we're still looking for something amazing to live up to our standards.
I don't recall specifics. I'll leave it at that.
Well, just FYI, as Pat said, she was voted down. Everybody has one vote. Representing their community, they have one vote. And we try to discourage any kind of sort of under-table cutting deals. So, one vote. I found one really interesting. We looked at one artist whose work was absolutely exquisite, I thought, in terms of his aesthetic and his handling of materials. We had such high hopes for this particular artist. And he got a very good station. They're all very good stations, but he came in, and I'm telling you, all the air just went out of our balloons. Because what he did is, he proposed something that looked like a plane crash. Yeah. And, right, not a good reference. We try to get him to sort of rethink it and make him understand what we were saying, but he was so in it that he couldn't see. Yeah, it looked like a plane that had been disassembled and reconstructed, and he used metals and rivets. So that was first. Yes?
At the beginning, you mentioned the censorship of the human form, though we wouldn't have it daily, we wouldn't have it meetings. At what level was that decision made?
What did he ask? About nudity.
No nude bodies.
To the point. It's all about, you know, installing artwork that people feel comfortable with. And fortunately or unfortunately, that one is sort of still on the line, you know, nudity, as Pat said. It's best to err on the side of people's general comfort.
I'm not questioning that, I'm just curious where in the decision process that was made.
Was that policy up front, or was that part of the decision process that the panel had to work through?
Well, it's sort of one of those unspoken things, you know? Yeah. Just don't drop the towel, kind of thing.
As you winnow down your, from 3,000 to 60 or whatever, were the artists compensated? Because it sounds like they put a lot of time in.
Oh, excellent question, yes. One of the things that, you know, you never want to do is exploit artists. They're professional people. If you ask them to do something, you should compensate them. Having said that, we provide them a $1,500 stipend. It's an all-inclusive stipend. Now, it's not a whole lot of money. Some people, you know, one artist, for example, was from the UK. He had to fly here on that $1,500. Finalist, just finalist. Yes. So it's 3 per station. Yes. Yes, sir.
At the end of the entire process, how will you evaluate the outcome? How do you know when you're successful or not?
I like that question. Yeah, that's cool. I don't know. No. You determine that you're successful because you got what you paid for, and that is in terms of quality. You know, there are several phases of the whole process. There's design development, there's fabrication, and there's installation. And you're intimately involved in all 3 of those phases. So there should be no surprises at the end. In terms of how we evaluate the effectiveness of the artwork, highly subjective. I mean, it's just like any other artist experience.
It's the joyful moment.
There we
You
go.
get off the stupid train and oh, this is what today was for,
There we go.
that moment.
We'll go with that.
And I do think one of the other testaments to WMATA's program is that this single call for artists produced that huge number, and each and every one who spoke to it said that it would really be a true honor to be represented in this system.
What advice would you guys give an artist who intends to respond to a future call to artists? Are there any artists in the room this Pat? Okay, all right.
Oh.
Yes.
I think the one thing I would say, and perhaps to Ann's point earlier, is develop or at least create a new document for this specific call, and don't simply pull one off the shelf.
Well, that's a good point. I don't know if she has the same artist in mind, but one wonderful artist, when you see other examples, who came without naming a name, but it really looked like that. It was an interesting project, but it had nothing to do with the community. So it's like, oh my God, you're talented, but you missed the boat also there, so we're disappointed. I think that, to the point of Maggie, I think good images, because when you see 3,000 images, if you want yours to stand, please good quality images help. Certainly, because your work is important, you feel it's important, but when you see, you know, dozens and dozens of images, at some point they have to stand out. I think for one, because otherwise, it's a process of reviewing hundreds of artists. The other one is really I think that what the committee appreciated is when there was a demonstration that the artist is interested in the community, potentially working with the community, involving the community in the development of their concept along the way, and doing research and having a sensitivity for the area. That would be my advice.
Speaking as an artist, I would never have entered something as amazingly huge as this. But I know a lot of artists who probably aren't interested, and so I believe Linda Sullivan and some of the others on the panel suggested that we develop a tutorial kind of a program that people who would like to get involved in this could go through step by step and figure out what am I thinking of, and what kind of materials do I need, and safety and durability. And so I think that would be developing the whole next phase beyond the silver line.
Well, to this point, I must say that after a board retreat, the IPAR board retreat, we are currently working on this idea for Reston and consulting artists in the community to see how this would best be designed and serve well the community of artists.
I think one of the interesting things that I found, because fortunately or unfortunately, all of the calls came into my office. And so luckily I had a student intern who was wonderful. We had to open the files. You would not believe how many artists submitted packages and there was nothing there. You put the CD in or the flash in or whatever and nothing. Nothing. And some said, the file cannot be opened, format not known, etc., etc. Although we give the submission criteria to the artist, it amazes me that some of them did not check their media before they sent them on to us. So that would be my advice. Check your submission before you put it in the mail. Linda Sullivan, did you observe anything that an artist needs to know to succeed at the process?
That hasn't already been said. I think it's really deflating, as someone said, when an artist comes in and it becomes apparent that they haven't done any homework, that they haven't, researched the community, they know nothing, or they announce that they know nothing about the community. That was, surprisingly came from a Virginia artist, which was really disappointing. I think, you have to do your homework, you have to take it seriously, you have to double check everything. It's nothing you slough off. These are huge projects. And everyone else is taking it seriously, so.
Thank you. I have one final question from me, and certainly you guys can continue to ask questions. But with our society so sort of inundated and engaged by new and emerging media, how do you see new media affecting public art in the future?
I think new media affords a whole new world to public art, but only on a temporary or interim basis. So unfortunately, given WMATA criteria and durability, it would, outdate itself within months, certainly not last for a long time. But I do think that it offers a very dynamic, exciting, engaging, ever-present opportunity, but perhaps better served for something near a station or maintained by a private party, things that we are looking to do perhaps on the Reston Station Plaza, but the ongoing maintenance and support is so significant.
I'm speaking of public art in general, though. I mean, right now, we live in a society where there's instant gratification, everything's sort of highly interactive. I think those dynamics, if you will will most likely affect public art. I want to know how you feel that might play out. Just not necessarily just for Metro, just in general. Yeah.
Well, certainly not installations, piles of lumber that people could carry away, that's not going to work. But projections, things that are created on your computer, maybe not with a paintbrush anymore. There's a wide world out there. And it's like living in the age when they just invented oil paint. Whoa, woohoo, the newest technology. So we've got a lot to look forward to.
I find it's a difficult one, just thinking of the artist Namjoon Paik, who was working on video, old TVs, and you see an exhibit and you think, how are they going to maintain that, or how do they transfer, the information from TV or a cassette player, and you have to think of being able to transfer whatever message into the next new thing. But at the same time, I think sometimes an artist chooses one medium over another for artistic reasons. So I find it challenging. I don't know for how long, I have in my mind projects that involve technology, but they seem to be private projects. So how long are they going to be able to maintain them? And how long are they going to keep their freshness also, I think? Because a lot of it has to do with elements of surprises, interaction, but do you get to know all the tricks? I don't know.
I think ultimately, though, that right now we're in the business of creating art objects. I think the more technology is integrated into the world of public art, that object will extend the experience to places unimaginable right now. Yes, sir.
Sense that this is drawing to a close, and I didn't want this to close without all of us in the community having the opportunity to thank you, Michael, and to thank this outstanding work that's been done by your group and the entire team that's put together. I know it involved hundreds of hours, and there's still work yet to be done. And we thank you for doing this. And we also know that there was as you mentioned at the outset, there was a strong possibility that your position and therefore art in the Silver Line, at least in phase 2, there was a strong possibility it wasn't going to happen. And it was a good thing that our community helped raise the concern about that, and we happen to have our representative on the Board of Supervisors, Kathy Hudgens, happened to be the chairman of WMATA at the time. So that was a lovely coincidence that was more than a coincidence, the fact that you're here today and this is happening. So thank you all for your hard work.